Well, it appears that the Israeli leadership and its billionaire supporters in the United States, who were instrumental in putting Trump into the White House, have decided to turn current events into a test of Jewish power. And what I mean by that is that this is a test of just how much power they wield, how far they can go, and what they can achieve. I think that's a mistake because I think their power and influence it's already disproportionate to what it ought to be, if it ought to be at all. But I think they've achieved enough in terms of enticing us into this war and then ultimately hurling us into the teeth of the enemy for them. I think they should take a different approach. But obviously, I hold a minority opinion. I think they're going to try very hard to bully President Trump back into attacking Iran. I think that's where we're headed.
Saw the report by CNN today. Let me try to find it. But essentially says that, there it is. Netanyahu is reportedly lobbying to shape the final US-Iran agreement, including by pressuring Trump through allies and intermediaries in Washington. Netanyahu has mobilized pro-Israeli senators and media allies, which, by the way, I don't know how these guys are not registered as foreign agents and not facing legal scrutiny for this. Yeah. But let's skip that. That's another story. And media allies in an effort to influence the negotiations and secure changes to the terms of a final deal with Iran. Netanyahu reportedly believes a final agreement will be reached, but remains concerned that Tehran will not uphold its commitment. Separately, Netanyahu said on Lebanon, "We will restore security to the north. That requires keeping the security zone in southern Lebanon and not leaving as long as Israel's security needs require it." In other words, Netanyahu is rallying all the supporters and the influence he has in the US to try to pressure Trump. So my question to you, do you think it is enough, or do you think Trump has what it takes to not bow to that pressure?
I wish I could give you a resounding yes as an answer that he can withstand the pressure. I think so. I think he and the Iranians have collectively reached the point where they see no point in any further war between us. I think that's really what you're hearing from President Trump. Now, I have to go back a few years. In my short interactions with him, he conveyed the impression to me of two things. Number one, he did not want a war with Iran. I mean, to be perfectly frank about that. He didn't see the need for it. He was confident that some sort of arrangement could be reached. In other words, a deal could be struck. Secondly, Donald Trump conveyed to me the impression that this was not somebody who wanted to go to war with anyone. That was really not his predisposition at all, and that he was genuinely focused on the United States. So when he came back into the political arena, most of what he said in his run-up to the presidency was consistent with what I had heard from him in private. Then he went through this transformation. The transformation really began with Ukraine. He could have ended that war very, very quickly if he had decided to do what made sense, which was to tell Zelensky, no, cut him off and say, we will no longer support you. We want you to come to reality with Russia. You can't live in a state of perpetual hostility to Russia, so please sit down with the Russians. He didn't do that. In fact, the opposite occurred. And he began repeating the sort of nonsense statements about Ukraine and Russia that were common in the neocon circles. So that disturbed me, and that was the end of any further conversation that I had with the president about foreign relations. That was April of 2022. And then he started to move increasingly into this state of belligerence. Now, I thought at the beginning of the collision with Iran, that when he announced that he had sent the B-2 bombers in for this beautiful attack and all this kind of nonsense, and it was beautiful and perfect and wonderful, and he then declared the war is over, we've destroyed it, it's over. I think he was telling you what he wanted it to be. I think he was being truthful insofar as saying, I want this thing over. But he couldn't do it. And I think he was overwhelmed by Netanyahu and his supporters in the United States. When you're dealing with people that are very, very wealthy, powerful figures in your society. And you have to be concerned about what they could do against you. It's not just what can they do for you, but what can they also do against you. I think he took all of that into account and he said, all right, I will give this a shot. And I think he talked to his inner circle, and his inner circle, for the most part, was supportive. I think one or two said, well, I don't know. I think this could be tough. I think Vance was one of them. But if that's what you want to do, I'm with you. That's always the excuse at the end. So I went into this, and he concluded, I think, pretty quickly, this is not going well. This is not going where I want it to go. He became very concerned about the financial markets. He sees himself as rising or falling in the polls and as president in terms of how the stock market is doing, how the financial position is developing for the United States, whether or not the economy is strong. And he's talked about that and talked about it and convinced everybody that everything is great, the economy is strong, and oh, by the way, this war is going to end soon. It's going to end soon. It's going to end soon. We heard that 39, 40 times. And I finally discovered that the only way he could end it is to end it. He couldn't talk his way out of it. There was no alternative to that. And there was not going to be a military solution. And the notion of using a nuclear weapon, my impression from him wants nothing to do with it. So that was off the table. But he still has a problem. The problem is called, what do I do with the Israelis? How do I present this? What do I tell them? And I'm sure he had some very, very difficult conversations with Netanyahu. And I'm also sure he's made it clear what he doesn't want them to do, which is he doesn't want them to go nuclear under any circumstances. Now he's in a great position in one sense. He has demonstrated to the American people that he indeed is a man of courage. If you don't think it takes a great deal of courage for a president of the United States to stand up and say, whoops, I'm stopping. This has not worked. We're doing something else. Now, that may not sound like an apology to you, but let me tell you something. That's an apology. That's a statement of fact. And he's made it abundantly clear, it doesn't matter how many times I bomb these people. It's not going to work. You want me to go back and bomb? Forget it. It's a waste of time. Now, that's the businessman talking. I either walk away from the table or I cut a deal. One of the two has to happen. If I walk, all hell breaks loose. Who knows where it goes? Who knows what will happen? So I've got to bring this to closure. And I think that's really what he's trying to do. Now, keep in mind, all we have is an MOU. And that is really a rough framework. It's got lots of good points in it. And a lot of those points are very comfortable for President Trump. And what I'm saying is, for instance, it says, we will not meddle in your internal affairs. Well, that has always been Donald Trump's private assessment of what we ought not to do. This is a man that said we've been too involved in too many other people's problems and countries. He also feels strongly that most of our forces should return home. The Cold War really is over. We don't need to be in all of these places. So this is the Donald Trump from an instinctual gut check. That's the way he is. And I think he then was probably shown, I can't prove it, but I think he was probably shown a lot of information that he had not seen. And that information included atrocious acts by the Israelis against people in Gaza, in Lebanon, around the world, across the Middle East. And I think he finally said, this has got to stop. Now, I don't think he'll ever come out and say exactly what I just did, but you got a glimpse of it when he said, why do you have to destroy an entire apartment building full of people when there's only one person in there you're trying to eliminate?
Yeah.
Well, that's the tip of a very large iceberg. And when I heard that, and several people I know, we all went, when did you finally wake up?
Yeah, exactly.
Congratulations. Yeah. Give that man a Cupid doll. You won. Good job. So a lot of people are now, I don't know if you've heard this yet, but you will, are calling for his resignation because he lost a war. Well, here's a big flash of the obvious. We've lost wars before. We have. We've never had this perfect victory streak. No great power ever does. But you have to have the common sense to understand what you can and cannot accomplish. And when it doesn't work, you have to cut your losses and move on. I think he understands that. I think that's what he's trying to do. But Now he has new problems at home, huge problems. And remember, who owns the media? Who dominates the financial markets? Who's out there that could really hurt him? Who could support his opponents? And remember, you have all these senators and congressmen. This is sort of a convention of hypocrites who are now throwing rocks at him, saying, "Oh, you must support Israel. Oh, by the way, send the check to this PO box." They're out there. They want to keep getting their money, so they're going to go down at least to this point with the good ship Israel if it's necessary, as far as they're concerned. In reality, what they should be saying, and I hope that President Trump will say this, is, Bibi, we gave it our best shot. It didn't work. The number one priority right now is not greater Israel. The number one priority is the preservation of the Israeli state, the survival of the Israeli people. That's where we need to focus now. See, nobody wants to go there, but that's exactly where we are. We have, in fact, reached that point. Now, why do I say that? Because anyone who has any appreciation for the nature of international relations, which is like the Pacific Ocean, it's huge. It's always changing. There are storms that come and go. It's never permanent, but it's very easy to see where the storm is headed right now. The two powers that are going to emerge from this war and will dominate the Middle East for decades to come, maybe longer. One is Iran, there's no question about that, and the other is Turkey. They are not the same. They are very different people, very different states with very different histories. And I spent many years of my life visiting Israel back and forth, and I tried to tell them on more than one occasion, you're barking up the wrong tree, as we say. Your existential threat is not Iran. Iran, Persian civilization, the Persian world and Persian culture, those things aren't your enemy. You've got a real problem further north and to the east, and that's called the Turks. They're very different. This is a resolutely martial people of great courage who are innately inclined to fight. These are natural soldiers. I mean, I've seen them. And I had the good fortune to work with the Turks. I think the world of them militarily. They are great people, but you do not want to go to war with them. In Iran, you're dealing with someone who is rational. Whether they like to think so or not in Israel, they are. They will coexist with you. You can talk to them and do business. But if you provoke the Turks, it's a fight to the finish. I don't think President Trump wants to be involved in that. And I don't want to be involved in that. And the Turks are certainly not looking for the fight at this point. But if you don't think they're ready to go, you're making a very, very serious mistake. And who dominated the Arabian Peninsula? Who dominated the Levant? Who dominated all the way to Egypt and into North Africa for centuries? We know who. Now, do they want to do that again? That's something that's beyond my knowledge. I can't comment on that. What I'm trying to get people to understand in the West, forget NATO. That's dead on arrival. It's a dead man walking proposition. It's meaningless. That's going to go away along at some point with this thing called the EU. The Turks are on the rise. The Iranians are on the rise. India, despite all of its problems, is rising, and it's got some serious problems right now as a result of the Persian Gulf closure. China is rising. Russia is rising. These are the great nations, the great powers, the great peoples of the ancient and medieval worlds. In other words, if you and I stepped into the time machine and went back to the year 1050, what would we find? We'd find little Europe up here, a group of states killing each other, and no one else gives a damn because it doesn't matter. And everything else in the world on a different track. And it took 1492, Christopher Columbus, the discovery of the Western Hemisphere, to change all of that, because it changed the terms of trade. It opened up wealth to Europe that it otherwise wouldn't have. Technology came online, and the Europeans grasped for it, had a knack for it, had a talent for it, and developed it faster, better than everybody else. Well, that technology is proliferated. Things have changed. Other people in other parts of the world now can do everything we can do. So the world is changing, and we have not wanted to change with it. What this war demonstrates is we must change. The world where we could sail in or fly in and bully people into submission is gone. What the Iranians have done, the Swedes could do. Hell, the people in Nicaragua could do it. It's a matter of linking space-based and terrestrial persistent surveillance, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, with all sorts of standoff attack weapons, ballistic missiles, unmanned systems of all kinds, cruise missiles, you name it. It's called ISR-strike. It's a complex that is built up. Israel can build that very, very quickly. And it will sit there and be impregnable for all intents and purposes once it has it. And that's true for everybody who invests in it. This is a different world. So you can't just run around and push in the front door, march in with a few troops and tanks and tell everybody to get in line. It's over. It needs to be over. That was not necessarily a good world, Mario. And I think that's bound up with what's happened in the Persian Gulf. In other words, this is about more than the United States and Iran. It's about more than Iran and Israel. It's about fundamental change all over the planet. I think it can be good, but there are people out there right now in the United States, and they want to stop it. They want to reset it to backwards. That's the problem. Oh no, the answer is go back in and bomb some more. The answer is do more damage, kill more people. This can't be allowed to happen. When the Romans lost a major battle to the Germanic tribes in 9 AD, they turned around and said, I don't think we need to cross the Rhine anymore. We've come far enough. And they backed off. When the Romans lost armies to the Persians, they turned around and said, well, I guess we've come far enough. And they backed off. In other words, they set limits. We have to have limits too. And I think limits could be a good thing.
So the Iran war could be the Suez Canal crisis for the US, similar to what the UK and France had back then in the 50s.
Except that Britain was a great power because of its empire. What do you have in the British Isles? I mean, I like the girls, but there's not much there. Okay. How do you get rich in the British Isles? Fish for herring? What are you going to do? They built an empire. The British genius was simply the Bank of England. It was the fleet, all of these things. They lost all of it because they had no empire. If you've been to the United States, you see the United States from the Atlantic to the Pacific is our empire. We don't need anything else. We don't need to be anywhere else. And see, that's something Donald Trump has always understood.
That's an interesting point. Fish for herring. I'm going to use that.
Hey, listen, I like herring. My friends in Norway will be angry with me, but I like herring.
Just on before we go back to, I wrote a note on some of about Trump just waking up now when it comes to Israel. I want to go back to that. One quick question on Turkey. I did see they've announced, I knew I saw it, I just checked it now. They've announced a 5th generation fighter jet this year. They've announced a few drones they've developed as well. How effective or how powerful is their military at the moment?
I would rate it certainly in the top 5 in the world.
Okay, wow.
And remember that it's a mistake to look exclusively at technology and firepower. Those things are immensely important. You have to look at the human material. The Turk is a very tough soldier. You talk about the Koreans, whether it's North or South, the Korean is a very tough soldier. If you start stacking up these various peoples next to each other, go back and look at their history for hundreds of years. You're dealing with different kinds of people, and some people make excellent soldiers. Not everybody does. That's one of the reasons many people like me were happy to see the draft go away, because you were bringing in too many people that were never going to be good soldiers anyway. It was better to have the people that wanted to be soldiers. And the Turks, they have a song they sing at every funeral for a Turkish soldier. Every Turk is a soldier, is what it's called.
Interesting. I spent a lot of time in Turkey, by the way, about a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years of my life in Turkey. So I know the place well. You said something at the beginning. You said Trump. So when you saw the statements he made about Israel, and not every time you shoot down 2 drones, you have to level a building. And you were shocked, and you're like, he just woke up. Is it possible he woke up about the atrocities happening in the region, what Israel's doing a while ago, but he only now he felt the necessity or the guts to speak out, whether it's out of necessity because he has to get out of the Iran war before the petroleum reserves empty out and the economy begins to have serious problems. So out of necessity, or just kind of had enough for some other reason, political reason, on why he kind of made that flip, him, J.D. Vance, and all the others. Even Senator Graham praised the MOU, but I think that's more strategic than anything. I don't think it means much.
I stopped listening to him a long time ago.
I don't blame you.
Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, I thought was entertaining. I don't consider him to be an especially brilliant foreign policy analyst, but he said, let's give peace a chance. What I think people have figured out is, look, this is a waste of time.